Okay, here's the way I see it. Duck. You kick it to the girl bunny down in the post. Then you dish it back to the guy bunny. Swing it around to Mike over there. And you go to the hole and you dominate.
David, we're on defense.
Ooh, 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 ooh. A lot like Kentucky, I don't play defense.
Oh, David. So glad we have such a good brother-sister relationship, and it's
I'm just
more
glad we know the
neither
same
side.
pop culture references.
Oh, happy March, everybody. And of course, David is back in the Bill Murray outfit, ready for another fun March.
Here we are again. Today on the show, we're talking about what's up for grabs in week 18 of the SEC. We're recapping the showdown that went down in Coleman between Alabama and Tennessee. Epic game on Saturday night. And Arkansas makes history in a bad way again this season. And yeah, we're also going to talk about my wonderful Twitter controversy that I started with Auburn's resume. All this and a whole lot more on the Hoops Southbound Show, including some not quite SEC content this week. So buckle up. That's what's coming on today on the Hoops Southbound Show.
Well, David, they definitely picked the right Saturday night thriller in yesterday's ESPN primetime matchup. Bama versus Tennessee was a game of runs indeed. This game went back and forth, but I think what shocked me most was Alabama actually played some defense, and it kept them in the lead for a solid portion of the game.
Yeah, incredible game there in Coleman. First time college game day is coming to Tuscaloosa for college basketball. That makes two schools now that I can think of that made college game day for their first appearance in college basketball this season and came to Arkansas for Arkansas, Kentucky, and now for Alabama, Tennessee. Obviously, the SEC getting a lot more presence, but this was significant for an Alabama program that is arguably at the height of the highest it's ever been in the history of its program, aside from its Elite Eight season. Nate Oates has taken this program to a brand new level. So for that regard, it's already a win in the eyes of, the prestige of Alabama's basketball program. But for this game, man, what a game. And with just a week left in the season, Tennessee is firmly in the driver's seat to raise a banner this season. They own the tiebreaker over Alabama after sweeping the Tide on the year, but more on that in just a little bit. But Maddie, Tennessee got out to a lead in the first half. Bama punched back and took the lead late in this game again. And who stood out to you who made the difference in this game for the Volunteers? Because I'll tell you who it wasn't. It wasn't the guy the media has been talking about nonstop. The question, can Tennessee, for all these people who haven't been following Tennessee this season, can Tennessee win without Dalton Connect if he doesn't put up 30 a game? We knew already the answer to that question if you've been paying attention and knew that the way this team was shaped. But who made the difference to you in this basketball game?
I mean, I think you take a look and it was a big, mainly team attribution here because they were able to, once Alabama was crowding Dalton Connect, that was their guy. That was, number one public enemy in Alabama for Saturday night. So they had him locked up, and we saw Santiago Vescovi take a few more shots than what we've been seeing him. Saw a little bit reminiscent of last year's game from him. Triple J had some excellent points, some great plays, especially on the defensive end. And then I'll let you talk a little bit more about it because I know you were super excited about his game. But Meshack, man, he was on fire.
See, I thought you were going to bring up Zakai Ziegler when I was posed this question in the prompt this week. But yeah, I'm going to talk about Meshack. Don't get me wrong, but if you're going to pass up talking on Double Z, someone needs to talk about Ziegler in this game. I'm just saying.
I mean, Ziegler was excellent. You saw him kind of take that big step in being that prominent point guard, making high IQ plays, some excellent dishes. I believe there was one down low he bounce pass through maybe Grant Nelson's legs, went in for like a it was crazy.
He also hit that huge
my comparisons to Allen Iverson were showing true in that game.
Yeah, and absolutely. And he hit that huge three late in the game. That was the other one that I definitely we couldn't forget where Ziegler really made his presence felt. 18 points in this game, 5 field goals made, 4 3-point baskets. Incredible day incredible night in Coleman for Sakai Ziegler in 18 minutes. But you're right, it wasn't just Ziegler. It was also a big portion of Gainey, who put a little bit of points on, but Meshack played some great defense for the Vols in this game. He got a couple of key plays. He came up with a huge steal in this game. He's also out there sharing the basketball, 4 assists in this game, coming up with some defensive rebounds throughout the night. Hit 2 3-point field goals in this game. He played 27 minutes off the bench, and I would argue that he had the best performance off the bench for the Volunteers in this game. And he was also another contributor for this team. If you look at the stat sheet, Connect's nowhere, he's the second highest scorer, but it's by a much wider margin than what you would expect. Zakai Ziegler leading the way for the Vols. It's a lot of guys in double figures for the Vols in this game. A lot of players making a big contribution. But like you said, we talked about Ziegler, we talked about Meshack. Another player, and I think it's important to highlight this, Adu. Jonas Adu is he's a key piece for Tennessee. And to me, he's a bigger piece of this team than Dalton Knecht. Dalton Knecht is the guy who gets you the bucket. Jonas Adu helps you in every other aspect of this game down low. He's the leader of the front. He's the leader of the front court, just like Dalton Knecht is the leader of the back court right now. And Adu in this game, 7 rebounds, 12 points, 2 blocks in this game, 23 minutes played. Really good night for him as well. And it's kind of been, as Adu goes, so Tennessee goes. But this was a great basketball game. Yeah, there's a lot of things to point out, but what else stood out to you about this game? And then I'll do my rambling.
I mean, for me, as we get closer and closer to tournament time, I think this was kind of the turning point in a lot of people's minds when it comes to Tennessee, because they're never really seen as a big contender when we get into March, especially with their past history. I think this game truly shows that they can go on the road and win against a tough team, a top team. And I think that's going to be a lot of a confidence boost or morale boost for this team as they get closer to the tournament, just showing that they can show up when it's needed. Like there's a tight race for that number 1 spot, and they proved that they weren't messing around. They're here to bring it home.
Yeah, definitely so. And they're closing the season out, like we said, going into the week with 4 Q1 games left in this season. But this whole week has been a statement for the Volunteers. This is a Q1A victory on the road in one of the toughest places to play in the SEC, according to KenPom. It's up there in the top 5, and as far as home court environments go, it's a far cry from what Coleman was back in the day when they used to do the come on down and tell people in the upper section at certain points of the game to come on down and fill the lower part of the bowl. We're a far cry away from where we were. It just seems like a short while ago what the status of Alabama basketball was. But we talked about it. The narrative from the national media has been, can Tennessee win without Dalton Knecht going off? And we knew the answer here because, we've been paying attention to Tennessee all season. They, like I said, they were my pick to win the SEC this year. We already knew the answer. Everybody else, got the answer. The team proved it. They had other players get the job done. This defense is absolutely for real. We've got to talk about that. They held Alabama to 74. Alabama is a team that averages around 90 points a game. And they did that in Coleman. So that defense definitely travels well and in a tough environment. And then Tennessee's offense, it can get the job done. It's already rated as a top 20 defense or a top 20 offense in KenPom. They put up 81 points on the road, and they outshot Bama from 3. Take that statement again. Tennessee outshot Bama from 3 in this game with 12 3-point field goals made in this game. That's normally what Bama shoots. Tennessee
At their home gym.
Yeah, that's what Bama normally does, and Tennessee gets the job done. They shoot better than Bama. Meshack, what the percentage wise, it wasn't great, but they got the job done, and they made those baskets count. Meshack, like I said, big game off the bench, grabbed some key plays. This is the best team in the SEC. They get the job done, but the job's not done yet. And we're going to talk about the extra contender that popped up this week with a surprise victory that they weren't favored in KenPom. They haven't been favored all season. Let's be real. And we're going to talk about the situation that's developing with South Carolina in a minute. But Maddie, for Tennessee, and then we'll talk on to Alabama, but we just need to hit this point home. I'm already started to see some bracketologists move this direction. It is time to start talking about the fact of the potential for a 1 seed for Tennessee. like I said, they're closing this season out with nothing but Q1 games, and then they're going to be getting a double bye in the SEC tournament, waiting for that one game that's likely to count toward their resume on Friday. That the committee will actually consider, and that'll be a decent game as well. So they're going to have 3 really good chances to continue to build that resume here late in the season. Does Tennessee deserve it, in your opinion, over Arizona? And can the Vols pull this out? And like, where do you think that's at?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at a comparative resumes there, you have Tennessee, who a lot of their losses that people are thinking are, you know, on the downside, getting them farther away from that 1 seed, were still excellent games. I mean, you got Purdue in there, to say the least, and so many people are so big on them, so that shouldn't be a down at all. Really with Tennessee, I think the big thing is closing out, like you said, the rest of this season. And I think doing that in SEC play, there's not going to be an opportunity for anybody to say they shouldn't be a 1 seed.
Yeah, I don't think there's many teams that have an argument, and I think they have it over Arizona at this point. Right now, that's just my opinion, and I think it's just starting to trend that way. And they've got some. I honestly think out of these last 3 games for Tennessee, that the committee will probably the games that the committee's likely to consider. I think if they win 2 of them, Tennessee's a 1 seed on Selection Sunday.
Mhm.
That's coming up. We got 2 weeks for them to wrap it up, and really 3 chances. I know everyone's like, well, 3 chances. Why do you keep saying that? And it's because the way the committee's voting rounds work. And we'll go into that a little bit more next week when we talk about the SEC tournament, and just kind of like some of my controversial opinions that exist there, about the SEC tournament. But in all honesty, Tennessee looks like a really dang good basketball team. One of the things that every national champion, or most national champions, are when they come out into the NCAA tournament, it's being top 4 in the BPI. Tennessee today tied UConn for the 4th spot in ESPN's BPI at 18.5. So they are definitely trending in that correct direction for what looks to be the potential 1 seed. For Alabama, they stepped up on defense in this game. They really did. They played some good defense, especially from what we've seen from them. I haven't looked at the KenPom numbers. Just visually, that defense looked better in Coleman. And did you see the same thing I did?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. It was still sloppy. The big
Wasn't
thing that
perfect,
I
but
noticed,
yeah.
yeah, the big thing that I noticed, I've mentioned a few times, when they do play better defense, they can't do it without fouling, which is my biggest concern going into, some higher ranking games. When you start looking at tournament time, you're not going to be able to foul all over the place. I mean, while a lot of people complain about the SEC refs, these tournament refs are going to be top tier, so they're not going to be able to get away with some of the stuff that they're used to, when they're playing some of that questionable defense that they do tend to play. But when it comes to Alabama, like you said, much better than we have been seeing. I think if those fouls weren't there, may have been a different game, because Tennessee shot quite a few. I had the numbers up, but they went away. But
How many free throws Tennessee shot in
yeah,
this game? Tennessee ended up shooting. They shot 29 free throws in this basketball game, which is only +4 over Bama, which is another criteria of Tennessee with more free throws made in this basketball game. Tennessee or
yeah.
Alabama shot the better percentage. Tennessee with more free throws made. They got to the line just a couple more times in this one.
Yeah, so it's just one of those. I think, especially having a home court advantage, they don't need to be going to the line that much. Um, Mitigate some points there. Could have been a different story for Alabama. So, like I said, I think Alabama played better on defense, but there's definitely some things that they need to work on before they start heading towards the tournament.
I would agree with the fact that you're going to get a physical game when you're playing Tennessee. That's part of what makes their defense so good, is they're physical. So like you're going to play a physical basketball team, so fouls are coming in this game one way or the other. So I mean, you got to figure out why you're going to do that. Defend without fouling is a key. But I really did feel like Alabama's defense, even though it hasn't been great this season, I thought it improved last night, and I think we both agreed that we saw improvement overall last night. And I think that gives me a little bit of encouragement for the future of this team headed toward the NCAA tournament. They're not completely out of the SEC championship picture right now, but like overall, they do. that gives me some encouragement for the NCAA tournament. So we'll see how that goes. But just like any other team, I'm a little confused though with Alabama not winning some bigger games. They've played a lot of high end competition. This is another example. This one you had on your home court and you couldn't pull this out. They really would have benefited, in my opinion, from a Q1A. I don't think they're going to get hit from this by any means from the committee. I think it's going to they'll still be ranging somewhere in a 4 or 3 or 4 seed. But I don't know if they're necessarily in the race for a 2 seed anymore. I don't know if that's in the reach for Alabama. Personally, and this is me, this isn't bracketology. I'd have them as a 5 seed. But metrics like this team a lot, and bracketologists are going to consider that, and that's probably going to bump them up a seed line or two because how that offense is. But I also think Alabama really needs Wrightsell back. Really, really needs him back, and this team would benefit so much more. Right now, Mark Sears and Aaron Estrada, they're carrying a heavy burden on this team right now, and it's not quite there. They really need Wrightsell to come back and help them out just a little bit. But I will say this. Mark Sears is a beast. He had a great game, even in the loss, and that's kind of what we've just come to expect from him. 22 points in this game, had 6 assists. He had a pretty darn good basketball game. Credit game where credit game is noticed. Mark Sears played a really good game in front of a good crowd at Coleman.
Yeah, Mark Sears was phenomenal. You could tell him, Rylan Griffin did a pretty good job trying to help balance out the offense with Wrightsell out. But like you said, Mark Sears is carrying the load for this team, especially in these last few games. He's really stepped up when it comes to, like we talked about, was Kai Ziegler, high IQ point guard skills right there. So, I think Mark Sears is going to lead this team to places that we may not have thought earlier in the season.
We'll see where it ends up. They're definitely going to be. I think our preseason estimates are kind of coming right on Bama. We're talking about a Sweet 16 possibility for this team, and we were talking about it's going to be good. We were thinking they could finish anywhere from 3rd to 6. In the SEC was kind of our feeling. So I think we're falling pretty much right into we're right in the Bama window we had created at the beginning of the season for them right now. So at least that's what I remember us talking about. So I feel like I do remember the Sweet 16 part. And again, I still think this team is capable of making the Sweet 16 this season. But Maddie, earlier this week, Bruce Pearl said, he was talking about voting for SEC Player of the Year. And he's like, if Tennessee won the SEC, he would vote for Dalton Connect for SEC Player of the Year. If Alabama wins Player of the or if Alabama wins the SEC, he'd vote for Mark Sears being Player of the Year. Well, let's just talk about it real fast. Maddie, who do you got?
I mean, I've got to go Dalton Connect. I mean, this kid kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting him to consistently have 20+ point games every single night. I think you look at it as whatever team that they're going up against, say Bruce Pearl, he's circling Dalton Connect's name. When they're playing Alabama, is Mark Sears going to be public enemy number 1 for Auburn? It depends on the game. Obviously, like we said, he's a great player. He is a beast, but they have a little bit more distribution. Right now, in my eyes, you look at Tennessee and it's all Dalton Connect.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think Dalton Connect should be Player of the Year for the SEC, but I'm going to go with a defensive Mark Sears here, just to make an argument for someone who may not be on the championship team, because I don't necessarily agree with Bruce Pearl's statement that I don't think the player has to necessarily be on the best team to be Player of the Year. But for Mark Sears' case, look where Alabama is, look where they were with their preseason, projections, and then ask yourself, why is Alabama in this position? And it's Nate Oates and it's Mark Sears. Mark Sears stepped his game up this season. He went from, the glue guy on this Alabama team this season, and now he's the dang outright leader of it. And he is filling the shoes that have been left behind by Noah Clowney and Brandon Miller in as many ways as he possibly can on the court. So those were some big points that those guys, some big contributions those guys had. Obviously, he's not in the front court, like Noah Clowney was, but overall, like I'm saying, he is leading this team and he is taking them as far as he can. And, that's, to me, is a big argument for Mark Sears. It's just where Alabama is versus where everybody kind of thought they were. We thought they were going to beat, we had them 5 coming into the preseason. SEC, I think, had them 6 or something like that, 5 or 6, and they're going to finish. Odds are they're going to finish the regular season race somewhere in the top 3. Odds are they're going to finish there. So, my opinion, Mark Sears gets his team just a little bit closer to where it was last year by stepping his game up. So to me, that's a defense level. I think that there's a decent, solid argument to be made for Mark Sears. But I agree with you. My pick would be Dalton Connect. And to me, it's the reason is this Tennessee team, while it's a different Tennessee team, still has a lot of the same pieces. And that Tennessee team last year came up short. And to me, the big reason is the difference between this Tennessee team and last year's Tennessee team is a guy like Dalton Connect who can go get you a bucket at any time. And to me, he changes Tennessee's team. But I think both players are outstanding. But I wanted to make
I have a
case.
concession. What if we go Connect Player of the Year, Mark Sears Offensive Player of the Year?
I don't totally disagree with that. I think Mark Sears has been sensational on the offensive end. I think he's a darn good basketball player. I think there's a lot of things that could be said. And like I said, he's certainly an all SEC player. He is certainly an all SEC player. So you got to give Mark Sears the credit he deserves. So, a lot of things out there. But Maddie, we were talking about title races, and there's a team that we need to talk about. Does anybody who listens to this show or watches on YouTube like the movie Rocky?
I named my dog after one of the main characters, obviously.
Yeah. No one believed in Rocky. Said he couldn't do any damage against Apollo Creed. Well, Rocky in 2 movies eventually was the one wearing the belt. I'm just saying. South Carolina's Rocky. I mean, picked last this season, and here they are with a chance to cause chaos in the SEC. They beat Florida, and Michie Johnson was sensational. Maddie, what'd you think of South Carolina versus the Gators on that game on Saturday?
I mean, I had some hope for them. Like I said in our last podcast, this game was kind of a coin flip for me, because we had several of those guys on South Carolina that could show up and show out. You got BJ Mack, like you said, Michie Johnson had a phenomenal game, and Taylon Cooper hit some crucial threes in this one as well. But South Carolina was just on. There was no stopping them. The Gators tried and failed.
Tried. Yeah.
It kind of looked like you mentioned, Rocky, like the tale of 2 basketball games. Because you'd have those where it looked like the first fight where he was giving them his all, it wasn't going to be enough. But in the second came out victorious. So, I mean, South Carolina just continues to impress. It's one of those that, I think we all picked against South Carolina last week, and they proved us wrong like they have the
more time. They got to keep doing it. They got to keep proving everybody wrong. And they played a red hot Florida team. That's why everyone was thinking it wasn't disrespect for South Carolina this time as much as it was, man, the Gators are playing some darn good basketball. And they keep getting better every week, and they're red hot. They're hard to beat. They look like they could beat anybody in the SEC right now. And then here comes South Carolina saying, y'all forgot about us again. That's what happened. And Michie Johnson played some basketball, 31 minutes, 10 field goals made, 2 3-point field goals made. He racks up 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 25 points. And he was out there with the chase and the back and forth between him and I think it was Clayton, or was it Richard? I can't remember. But they were going, which one?
Clayton.
Yeah. They were going back and forth there at the end of that game. And I was like, man, this is good. This is good. It was a nice little chase down there at the end of the game, but South Carolina edges them out. And it puts them now in the title race with Tennessee. And South Carolina already beat Tennessee. That's crazy. And now you got to go to Columbia and do it? Tennessee's going to have to go to Columbia this week to close out an SEC championship in the midweek. That's a sensational moment. And we have to talk about, let's talk about what's going on this week, because that was such a massive win that it's Carolina chaos. That's what it is. It's Carolina chaos, and it completely changed the conversation that was about to occur this week about where everybody was. So, Maddie, let's talk about what's at stake coming in here to week 18 because it is a crazy week. You guys at home, you heard us talk about Tennessee and Alabama, but South Carolina entered the chat like we mentioned. The SEC title race is coming down, and just look at the standings of this thing right now. It's a tight race. You got Alabama, who just a game behind Tennessee at this point, and then South Carolina also sitting there behind with Alabama, tied for second at 12-4. Any team loses a game, any team wins a game, it can make an impact right now for how this thing's going to go. And Tennessee doesn't have an easy week. They have to face South Carolina, and they have to face Kentucky this week back home at TBA. That's not an easy closeout. That's not an easy one at all, because at any given time, there might be a day that Kentucky gets red hot like they did against Alabama and shoot the building on fire. And then Alabama's got a good game to get a chance. Like, if they beat Florida, Alabama's closing the season out against what has been a lackluster Arkansas team. So we'll see how that one plays out as well. And South Carolina right now in position for an SEC. Maddie, out of these three, who do you like? Who do you like out of this?
Out of these three, my head's telling me to go with Tennessee. But like we said, everybody picked Florida last week.
Yeah.
Everybody picked Florida last week. And they're going home, or they're going to South Carolina's home court. You know that place is going to be absolutely electric. And I believe we talked about a little bit South Carolina, Tennessee, a little bit of a rivalry there. So, it's going to be a huge game.
Oh,
And, they talked about it after the South Carolina Florida game, that basically the winner is probably going to be decided on Wednesday night.
Could be
in that game. So, there's a lot on the line, and I don't know if I want to discount South Carolina at home after what they did to Florida.
That's the thing, isn't it? They could bet. What if they do it again? Obviously Tennessee should be the favorite, but it's hard to win on the road in the SEC, as we have learned so well this season. To me, that's going to be the game that decides it now, which is just crazy, because that's not how we thought this week was going to play out. The way that Florida was playing, South Carolina changes the narrative completely. But the SEC title race is a 3-team race right now. We didn't mention much Alabama, but they're right there in the middle of it. So like they've got a chance too with everybody, because they've got the win over South Carolina. So we'll see how this whole thing plays out, but it's certainly crazy. Other things that are for stake this week. Texas A&M gets that win over Georgia. Much needed, because that team was almost done. Like it was almost time to stick a fork in the Aggies, because they were coming out of the oven without salmonella and everything. 165 degrees is what you're looking for. Their season was almost finished, and they've got their last breath that they're holding on now to, with a chance to make a run for the NCAA tournament without having to win the SEC tournament. This is their last chance. And another team that's sitting in a position, they got 2 Q2 chances this week, which is something when we circled these games. They're going to have to face Texas A&M. Ole Miss is going to have to face Texas A&M. That's a Q2 chance. And then they've also got their game that they're going to be playing against. Good grief, it was on the top of my head. I'm going to have to pull up the rundown here, because it's right here. It's right here for everybody who's looking for the show real fast. My head is just spacing on me at this given moment. Give me 1 second. My brain. Oh, there we go. Yeah, they're going to be facing Georgia. I knew it was a team we already mentioned. They're going to be facing Georgia during the midweek. They got to win both those basketball games. If they win both those games, they got a chance to make the NCAA tournament. There still has the potential, I do believe, for 9 teams in the SEC or in the NCAA tournament. It could still happen. I think one of these teams have a chance to get in, and that would be the number that I was talking about at the beginning of the season with 8. And then finally, we got Florida and South Carolina both playing for seeding and improving their seeding spot. Joe Lenardi on Saturday was talking about, like, he thought South Carolina could rise as high as a 4, depending on what they do this week. I don't agree, but I don't disagree with Joe Lenardi on that. I think they can rise. I think they can rise quite a bit into a pretty good spot. I think 5 is something that could happen for them. And then for Florida, a 6 seed's on the table. Possibly a 5 seed, depending on how well they do this week. I think a 6 seed's the more likely outcome if they get the job done this week. So we're playing for seeding. We're playing for a chance to even make the tournament, and then of course an SEC title is on the line. That's what's at stake this week, Maddie. But let's talk about something last week.
Oh, David, you really want to talk about all the problems that you started on Twitter?
I mean, why not?
All right. So for anybody that doesn't know, David started basically the Twitter fight of the week on Thursday while mildly hilarious really struck a nerve with some Auburn fans. Now, things are fluid, so the Q1 record may not be the same after we have this conversation as when the episode premieres, but why don't you just walk everybody through what you said and your point so that way they can get your perspective?
Okay, so as of this morning, it's still true. Auburn has one Q1 win. So I kindly pointed this out to everyone, who follows us, and it started a nice conversation between Alabama fans and Auburn fans in our comments section. So yeah, but the point I kindly made is that the only team with the worst Q1 resume in the SEC is the Vanderbilt Commodores. I just let that sink in for a minute. And on Wednesday, like I said, we talked about this, and yeah, I pointed that out because out of the top 20 teams in the net, Auburn is the only one with less than 3 Q1 wins. That got that reaction. A lot of upset Auburn fans, but it's one that I have been pointing out for a minute now on this show, and it's something that I wanted to talk about, and it's one I talked about with Dom back in our last bracketology segment that we did. Good grief! And if you remember, one of the best bracketologists in the country, according to Bracket Matrix, agreed with my point. He didn't say that would be the way it played out. I want to make this fair. Like, no one is saying that this is how the committee is going to rule on things. But he agreed with me in the principle of the point was that's something to consider when you're talking about this. And this isn't just about Q1 wins. I'm going to say this, and not a lot of people are going to agree with me, but Auburn's resume sucks. I mean, sucks. Take a good look at this thing. And I'm being real, and it's just what it is. Auburn's best win this season is, of course, a Q1A victory over Alabama at home. That's a good win. It's a great win. Like, you can't knock that win. But that's their only Q1 win of the season. Appalachian State, Florida, Mississippi State. If those losses had occurred outside of Neville, or had occurred in Neville, they would have been Q2 losses. And that's just in the Q1 column. They're also 1-7. And they're that 1-7 record is just absolutely, it's lopsided. Like how they're being faced up against some of the best teams in the SEC. And I heard one argument was, well, these are occurring on the road. Most Q1 games occur on the road because it's rare to get a top 30 net team in your house. But let's go to the Q2 column. And Auburn fans were quick to point out that they're perfect in Q2. In fact, they were beating every Q2 team that they're playing by double digits. The best win they have on the road in there is against Ole Miss, who may or may not make the tournament. The next one is St. Bonaventure, which is their best neutral floor win. That's probably their best win in the Bonnies are probably their best win in the Q2 overall, since they're a little bit higher in the net, but they're not close to smelling the bracket right now. And the Bonnies play in a multi-big conference in the Atlantic 10, and they're nowhere close. The games they were so hyped about winning in the non-conference, Indiana's now a Q3 game. The average opponent ranking in KenPom away from home is 77.6. That average they play on the road is around a team like Florida State, who is abysmal. My point is this. Auburn's resume is filled up with nothing but Q2 wins. And most of those opponents are worse than Butler, who's been virtually eliminated from the NCAA tournament contention at an at-large bid right now. And somehow people are trying to make an argument that this is a top 16 seed team right now. This team deserves a 4 seed? You want me to be impressed with this? I mean, come on. Come on. Not when teams like BYU have more Q1 wins and have more Q1 and Q2 wins combined in the win column when I did this math. I'll have to check the net to see if that's changed, but if they did, it's tied at this point. And the Cougars have more Q1A victories. They have over Kansas in Lawrence, in the Fog. They beat Iowa State, who's trying to get a 2 seed right now, and Baylor, who's going to be a top 16 seed. And the Cougars have a top 10 offense in KenPom. And that's not the only example that's out there of teams that are kind of getting passed over for a better seed at this point than Auburn. And as another one, I checked this out on Warren Nolan. No team has ever gotten a top 16 seed with 2 or less Q1 wins. It's crazy to even think about. Auburn is a tournament team. That is not what I'm saying. They are a tournament team, but I do not believe that they should be given a top 16 seed if this is what they're if they're going to come in with 1 or 2 Q1 wins. They do not deserve a top 16 seed because body of work is something that should be considered. And it's one of the issues that actually the committee is recommended to look at when they put all these issues together. But to me, this whole Auburn resume, it looks like the chocolate donut diet. I mean, straight up, it looks like the empty calories, blowouts over bad teams away from home overall. That's what a lot of it looks like. And if you haven't faced that many teams outside the top 75 on the road, it's kind of a problem. It's a mess. This is just my opinion on this. There's barely an ounce of protein in Auburn's resume. To me, honestly, if I was seeding the tournament, and this will not happen, but I would make them a 7 seed. Like, I would not put them on the same line. But that metric situation is going to pull them up. But to me, metrics be damned here. Like, Auburn needs to beat somebody. Just facts. They need to beat somebody. And will the committee agree with me? We'll see. Probably not. I'm big on analytics, but you got to beat somebody too. Otherwise, we just need to go out back and shoot free throws and measure the efficiency of those free throws and put someone in the tournament over that. Because that's what you're saying. So to me, beat somebody, put some meat on that resume. Otherwise, I don't think you deserve a top 16 seed. You don't deserve a 4 seed or better. If this is the resume that you're going to present is going to be something that's inflated by metrics. Just at the end of the day, if you don't have those 2 Q1 wins, there's no argument. There shouldn't be an argument about that. Maddie, I welcome your opinion, but that's my point, and I know it's rough. But to me, like, winning games matters, and that should be something we should be considering.
No, I mean, I totally get it. I've been kind of right there with you, David. While I think Auburn is a fantastic team that's
They're
gonna
great. They're
do well
great.
in the
I don't want
tournament.
to take away from that. They're a good
Yeah.
basketball team, but they got to beat somebody. But sorry, I just want to clarify my point for that.
Yeah, not a problem. But like you said, many of these games that people are excited about to get them into the tournament, like you said, they're blowing teams out, but those teams aren't sniffing the tournament at this point. So, I mean, think you make good points where you're bringing in, other teams that have better opportunities and have better resumes for when it comes to seeding. And I also think, I'm a little concerned that this is getting to your head when this is also the program that swears up and down that they are a blue blood.
Wait, no, if they got a top 16 seed on this would be officially calling them a blue blood at this point, because that is blue blood treatment if I've ever heard it. Because if it was any other team, I just got a feel the committee wouldn't feel the same way, and I don't think that the argument should exist. I don't think it should be. I've been rough on Kentucky at times. I've been honest about what I believe in Kentucky, and Kentucky is a dang good basketball team, and they're a dang good basketball program with a rich history. Auburn's right now, they just don't have the wins. Just honest to God, that what it comes down to is wins. You got to win basketball games. My opinion at the end of the day.
Yeah, we give tough love and honesty. We don't coddle anybody around here.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I said, it's not to take away how talented this team is, but at a point you have to do the work, and just being a talented team isn't enough. And like, you have to do the work at some point and collect wins. So if they were to take a bad loss this week, that who they got left, who could just really do some damage to Auburn's resume, like Missouri. If somehow they lost in Columbia, which I don't think will happen, but if they did, I don't think there's an argument in the world left to not drop Auburn somewhere to the 7-10 range. I don't think there's anything left. And I hope somebody, if that were to happen, I would hope that someone on the committee would see the same thing. Like, they would go, yeah, that's not that's not what we normally are experiencing here. I know these numbers are great, but well, Maddie, speaking of losses, this Arkansas team, now we're going to be brutally honest on our team. Here we go. Yeah, the one that we're fans of. This Arkansas team made history again in not a good way. It's weird to go back to Tuesday because we get overcrowded by the stuff that happened on the weekend. But Tuesday night, Arkansas made a historic loss. Arkansas lost to Vanderbilt and Bud Walton, and things are going. We're going good for about 10 minutes for the Razorbacks, and then Arkansas completely forgot how to play basketball in that game. And yeah, Vandy beat Arkansas 85-82. Really a good win for Vandy. Impressive performance by Lubin and Majon. Vandy picks up a decent win and one of their best wins of the season for Vanderbilt. Credit to them. For Arkansas, holy cow. It's not about the fact Arkansas lost another game this season. We know Arkansas has been anything of what their expectations were for this year. That's not the story here. What happened on Tuesday was not only a loss, it was the worst loss in Eric Musselman's tenure, and it was the first time Arkansas has ever taken this kind of loss, the worst loss you can get in college basketball. Yeah, you heard that right. In the history of the net, Arkansas took its first ever Q4 loss on Tuesday. It's never happened in the history of the net. Arkansas's never had one. Previously, the Razorbacks have had only 5 Q3 losses all time in the net, 3 of which came in Mike Anderson's final year at Arkansas. Maddie, let's just be real here for a second. Are you shaken by this loss? Is this a loss that Eric Musselman can get through, in your opinion, or is this a loss we'll circle back, a year from now and say this was the game that began the end of the Eric Musselman tenure at Arkansas, or is it something else to you?
I'll be honest, I completely am checked out on Arkansas at this point this year. I forgot the game was going on. I was taking Apollo for a walk and I got the halftime notification on my phone. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I need to go home and watch that. Um, and so I only caught the second half, which was absolutely terrible. Yes, they kind of fought their way back, but that's not a position I would have ever thought we would be in at home against Vanderbilt.
No.
It was one of those games that I just kind of checked off in my mind. Surely we'll win that game. We haven't won very many others, but surely that's one we can mark down in the win column. So, you know, I don't know, David. I think Eric Musselman can turn it around. I think he's gonna work his magic and do what he can as a coach. At this point, I just kind of think it's the team. Because they're really deciding the fate of this Razorback program. I don't think Eric Musselman's changed too much throughout the year. We saw, that team play against Vandy where they had that impressive 10 minutes and then it went downhill and they had to fight their way back, ended up with a loss. And then they go to Rupp and actually play a decent basketball game, which I wasn't planning on watching either after they lost to Vandy, but turned it on and was like, we have a chance here. It's one of those situations where I really don't know what to think at this point, but I do still have hope that Eric Musselman can turn it around after we open up the transfer portal and get some more 4 stars coming in that I think will help him build this program back to what we saw before the season.
Yeah, so, Shelly and Elohim coming in, those are encouraging things. But for me right now, just in this moment, I think the only thing that's bugging me about this happening is the fact that it's year 5 and that this season has been profoundly bad. Like, I truly believe this is the worst Arkansas team since 2008, 2009. Arkansas hasn't had a team this bad since the Pelfrey era. And you're just kind of asking what caused this. And now we're asking, is this going to be, like 2015, 2017 in the Anderson years where Arkansas went from a 5 seed to not being in the tournament to going back to the tournament and another year later after that miss, or have the Musselman years peaked and we're heading toward like it was at the end of the Pelfrey years where you went to the tournament and never made it back. It's really hard to tell because I'm a fan of this team. That this is my alma mater. This is it's hard to take the fan eyes off, and it's even really hard to just tell me what my heart is telling me and what my head is telling me at this point. The numbers this season are so drastically different from any year in Muss's tenure at Arkansas, and they're drastically different compared to his teams that he had at Nevada. I have no idea. And I just have to trust that the previous numbers say that Eric Musselman is a top 25 coach in the country and has he's an elite defensive coach who has built Final Four caliber defenses at Arkansas over the, out of the last 6 years, 3 of which have been national championship quality defenses. So I mean, it's absolutely wild. I don't know what to think. And I think sitting down in next season, I'm hoping a lot of my questions are answered. And I'm not the only one around Fayetteville who this game shocked and to question a lot more. Um, I've already called the offense into question, but I think that's something we just considered anyway because Muss's defenses are great. He's absolutely without doubt when you look at the metrics behind it, one of the best defensive coaches in the SEC. This season has just been horrible. And the numbers are so bad that it's tanking every quality that the averages are so bad this season that they're below averages. They have completely tarnished what the numbers were for like the first season, here at Arkansas. They numbered like the all-time net ranking for Arkansas. The average net ranking for Arkansas in the Muss tenure is now below what the net ranking was for the first team. And he's never had a team that's been below that until this season. And this team's net numbers are so ridiculously, it's out of proportion bad. So you don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And I'm left with more questions than answers. And this is just, I don't know what to say anymore. Like this is just a drastically bad loss.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, I start thinking, is it the team? Is it the coaching staff? We had his go-to guy went to USC B or
Oh yeah, Santa Bernardino. Yeah,
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 San Bernardino. Yeah.
yeah. Got
Um, so I'm wondering if, they
coaching
had
change.
a coaching fit that wasn't actually a fit and they need somebody else in there. Or like I said, if it's the team, is it a lack, is it a chemistry thing? Because, we can see them turn it on and have solid chemistry like when they played against Kentucky on Saturday. It was great. I don't know if it's just something that these guys have to make sure they hold hands and sing kumbaya before the game or what's going on, but they've got to figure it out next season, or I think a lot of people are going to be out on Coach Musselman and Fayetteville.
Yeah, it's a big eyebrow raiser. It is a serious eyebrow raiser, just how weird this season has been. And I didn't think it was possible for Eric Musselman to, I thought he had a lot more space, for, what was going to happen. I thought you'd get through a bad year, no problem. Taking a Q4 loss like this for the first time in Arkansas's net history, which the net's young, but it's only been around since 2018, but still over 6 seasons of having the net now, it hasn't happened. This is the worst loss in at least 6 years. So it's wild to even think about. All right, Maddie, let's get into the games that are coming up for this week. Okay, so we know the SEC title race is on the line, and we're not mentioning your game this week. It's because we're kind of focusing on these other games, because this is really the story this week in the SEC. And so we're going to start things out talking about Alabama and Florida. Maddie, when you look at this Tide team going to face Florida on the road, what are your thoughts, and how do you think this game's going to play out?
I think Alabama needs to take some notes from that game against Tennessee. They need to make sure to keep up that defensive strategy that they had against Tennessee. It worked very well, kept Dalton Connect from shooting, kept a lot of easy shots from going up. They made shooting more difficult, and that's what they need to do against this Florida team at home. Like you like to call Florida Alabama Junior. If they're shooting lights out, Alabama's on the road, may not be getting shots up. This could be a dangerous game for Alabama. So I think as long as they keep up that defensive strategy they had going against Tennessee, try not to foul as much. You're going to need Grant Nelson in those final minutes against Florida's front court. So I think it's going to be a very strategic game that Alabama's going to have to play, and they're going to have to play it well.
Yeah, Tuesday night in the O is not going to be an easy game at all. I am very, very curious if Alabama gets Reitzel back for this game or not. To me, he's a big contributor for this Alabama team. And like I was mentioning earlier, I just feel like Alabama really needs him right now to get through really the rest of this season, so getting him back on the rotation and helping out some of the rest of this front or this backcourt out for Alabama to me is big. But really talented teams here. Two offensive juggernauts, some of the best that we've seen in the country when you break it down in Ken Palm. What's surprising here is the fact that even on the road, Alabama's favored. So Ken Palm has this game 91-88. Maddie, who are you going with in this one? Do you like the Tide or do you like the Gators?
It's a tough pick for sure because Alabama's got the SEC title on the line, but Florida's coming off of a hard loss. They're going to be at home. They're still fighting for a chance at the end of the season. So I'm going to go Florida. I'm going to pick the upset.
You're going to go Florida in this one. Okay. I totally get it. Well, it wouldn't be the upset. Ken Palm actually favors Alabama in this game. So you're going to agree with the computer here. I'm going to go. Oh, no, you're going with the upset. You're picking Florida. I'm sorry. My bad. But yeah, no, just a moment. But yeah, no. I'm going to go. I'm also going to go Florida. Yeah, I'm going to go Florida here. I'd like Florida's front court. And like you said, coming off that loss to South Carolina, that's just hard. And I think you can get up and try to figure out how you're going to get, moving forward and trying to get yourself ready for the NCAA tournament. And also the benefit is that you're going back home for this game, and you're going to be coming back for a crowd that's ready to see you after taking your road trip. So I'm going to go Florida here. I think they could get the job done. Biggest question to me is going to be how many 3-pointers these two teams hit. Alabama close to 12 3-pointers a game, whereas you got Florida is ranging just under 8 right now at 7.9. So that's going to be the catalyst point to me is whose offense is humming quicker, especially from deep. Looking at guys like Walter Clayton and Mark Sears in this one. And the new kid on the block for Bama, Cosby. Really, let's see how much that kid can get going because he stepped up big time in that Ole Miss game in Oxford. All right, Maddie, this one could decide the SEC. Tennessee's headed to Columbia. I mean, we talked about it, the wild card Rocky team, South Carolina coming in, all that good stuff. Tennessee just got that huge win in Coleman. But we know what's at stake here, and we know what could be happening. Let's put the crazy fun storyline of the team that was picked last to win the whole thing. What do you like about this matchup? Where do you think this game's going to be won at?
And this is a hard game to, kind of analyze because you have this South Carolina team that can shoot from around the perimeter, but if that's not getting it done, they can shoot inside. And you've got Tennessee, who's kind of the same way. They rely very heavily on their defense as well. So I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup, especially when you've got South Carolina at home. I love an underdog story, David.
All right, all right.
I love an underdog story, but this one, it's going to be a scrappy, hard-fought game.
Yeah, I would agree with that matchup I'm looking at in this. Okay, we'll get to the pick in a minute. But the matchup I'm looking at for here is going to be between the bigs. You heard me talk about it a little while. Jonas Adu is just a key player for Tennessee. He's a key player. As he goes, the team goes. And then I would also expect Dalton Connect to step his game up just a little bit after the game there in Coleman. We know that he can play even better than what he did play at. So I'm interested, though, primarily in what's going to happen in the front court in this game because I think Tennessee has an advantage there. And as Jonas Adu goes, so do the Volunteers go. So I'm liking that matchup. Tennessee also a very good rebounding basketball team and one that can shoot the 3-ball a little bit themselves. Very efficient offense. So that to me is one of the big things that I'm circling around to. So let's go to the picks. I'm going Tennessee in this one, and I'm sticking to my guns on Tennessee being SEC champs, which is my preseason pick. Who are you going with?
Like I said, love an underdog story, but in this one, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Tennessee is coming out with a win.
Gonna be a hard fought battle. It'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, you're right. That's gonna be the stressor. We'll see what happens. It's a big midweek that's gonna be shaken up in the SEC. All right, let's go to some more bubble teams here. We've got Ole Miss, who has to face Georgia first. They got to win their Q2 basketball games in order to get into the NCAA tournament. It's one of the big lacking things on their resume so far this season. When you look at Ole Miss's Q2, when you look at Ole Miss's tournament resume right now, it's been swinging back and forth. A week ago we were talking about they only had one Q2 win. Now they're up to 3-2 as of Sunday. They're 78 in the net. They really need some wins. They just got a win over Missouri this weekend, but the games are coming down to the wire. What are you thinking about in this one between Ole Miss and Georgia, Maddie? This game, of course, is being played in the Stag.
I'd probably automatically say Ole Miss, if we were at the Pavilion. But at Stegman, Georgia's been pretty decent this year. They've started kind of falling off when it comes to the end of the season, but I can see them kind of trying to revive themselves for the end of the year, try and go out, proving that they've stepped up, they're better this year, and they're going to continue to get better. The thing that worries me, as always, you've got Ole Miss, the Giants that can't seem to rebound down low, which I think is going to be hard on the road at Georgia. You got to play defense when you're that big. You can't let anybody bully you.
You got
So
basketball. Yeah. I totally understand where you're coming from there. Totally understand it.
But I think I'm going to go Ole Miss just because of Georgia's decline as of late. Haven't been playing as well as we saw them at the beginning of the year. So I think Ole Miss is going to be the one that's a little more battle tested. Go in there, try and scrape up a couple more wins before the tournament.
Yeah, so Georgia's lost 9 out of its last 10 ball games, which is something we haven't talked enough about. They have not played well through SEC play. They're probably, I'm not going to call them a disappointment because, I just thought they'd be a little bit better. But I still think that team has potential, and I think next year can be great. And they got a bright future ahead of what they're building there in Athens. Ole Miss is certainly the team who's playing for more right now. They're playing for a chance to get in and get into the SEC, get into the NCAA tournament, and they've fallen off a little bit. They lost 3 straight going into that Missouri game, and they've finally got themselves right in that one. So they got 2 big chances here late in the season. They're must wins. I think you can go into Stegman and pull off an upset. So I'm with you. I'm gonna rock Ole Miss in this. It's going to be a stressful one, though. I mean, certainly so. So I'm with you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick Ole Miss. I also think Ole Miss's ability to shoot threes with guys like Murray, Matthew Morrell, and Brakefield, who can contribute a little bit at times. I'm liking Ole Miss. We'll see how the front court plays out in the 5 spot, which has just been the thing with Ole Miss this season. All right. Another bubble team, Texas A&M, beating Georgia on Saturday. Important win, but they got Mississippi State, who's coming to Reed there in College Station. Maddie, who do you like in this one, and what are your thoughts? It's a must-win game for Texas A&M.
Yeah, coming into the season, I was so high on Texas A&M, and much like my Hogs, they have let me down a
Yeah.
lot. But there's something about Reed. They tend to play much better at home. So there's a little bit of me inside that's saying there's a chance. I mean, you can't discount a team that's got Wade Taylor and Boots Radford in the dynamic duo. Henry Coleman Jr. has really been stepping up, or Henry Coleman the fourth has really been stepping up a lot for Texas A&M. But Mississippi State's been hot.
They're coming off that loss against Auburn.
Yeah. Your man Josh Hubbard, I feel like could still be able to get it going in Reed. So I think it's going to be a huge matchup in the backcourt. Going to be a lot of threes shot in this game, probably some wild ones by Wade, the way that Mississippi State's defense rolls. So, I'm thinking Mississippi State's going to take the dub on this one, but I don't think Texas A&M is going to go down easy.
We're hanging out too much because I'm in agreement with you. Josh Hubbard. Man, I love this kid. Like, this kid can play some basketball. He's out here putting game highs up. He's the most underrated freshman out of this class. And it's wild how much everybody missed on him. And, like I said, Josh Hubbard can play some ball. How about the love, by the way, Josh Hubbard gave to Reed Shepherd on social media? It was like your game when he was giving the salute to Reed Shepherd, that back and forth game they had in Starkville, where Hubbard thinks he's got the shot, and then this game's going to overtime, and then like Reed Shepherd hits the floater to win this thing, with no time left on the clock. Great game. Great game in that one. That was a fun one. And neither one of those kids should have walked away. Josh Hubbard should have walked away from that game with his head held high because he played a heck of a basketball game. Coming off 2 losses, Mississippi State's been a pretty good basketball team overall, despite what happened going 0-2 this week. I overall like Mississippi State right now, and somebody else we're not talking about enough. As much as by committee Texas A&M can rebound the basketball, there's a big dominant force down there for Mississippi State who can get the job done, and he makes a lot of contribution, and it's Tolu Smith, and he can play some great basketball. Tolu Smith's outstanding, and then he also gets contributions out there from guys like DJ Jeffries and other members of this front court that do a really, really good job. And they play top-ranked defense. They play outstanding defense. So let's see how much they can limit Wade Taylor's 18.2 points per game. You got to make sure you're not fouling, though, because Texas A&M likes to get to the free throw line, and you're talking about giving Wade Taylor 5 easy points there through if you let him get to the free throw line an average amount of times. So I'm going to go. I'm like you. I'm going State here. But it's going to depend a couple of times on how that whistle goes, I feel like. And if you're State, you can't let that happen. So you got to make sure you're playing solid defense and you're limiting Taylor as much as possible. We just talked about Mississippi State. We're going to stay on them and talk about their matchup with South Carolina and Starkville. Crazy basketball game in Starkville that can be coming up to close out the season. And this one, this one's weird to think about, right? Because we were kind of thinking about this as seeding purposes and how the season would finish up for South Carolina, who's been the sensational story. The SEC title could still, in theory, be on the line, and Starkville could play a contribution in this one. What are you thinking about this game at the Hump, and who do you like on that? We'll go quick here.
I really think it depends on how that Tennessee South Carolina game goes. I think they're going to be absolutely gassed after that game. So it's going to take a lot of rest and recovery from the Gamecocks. But in this game, I really like the backcourt matchups. Like you said, we talked about Josh Hubbard. We got Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper. If Talon Cooper's hitting shots, then it could be a dangerous game for Mississippi State. But like you always say, the Hump's a weird place to play basketball. So I don't have my money on Talon Cooper hitting good threes, but man, I like Mississippi State in this one solely because South Carolina is going to have to play their absolute butts off in that Tennessee game, and I don't know if they're going to be able to come back from one that quick.
Kind of sounds like Bama fatigue, doesn't it? Just a little bit. You remember like everybody in football talking about playing Bama and, like the next game you don't play as well, might be the next consideration here. But yeah, South Carolina, depending on how that Tennessee game goes, can have a lot of impact on the way that this one shapes out, and depending on how, what impact it'll play in the SEC title chase. If South Carolina beats Tennessee and they just got to win one more game to make sure they close this thing out in style, we could see a red hot South Carolina team coming out playing the best basketball they've played all season and sweep Mississippi State on the season. On the other side of this, you got a Mississippi State team who's looking for a little bit of revenge this week. These are both very winnable games this week for State. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm like you. I'm asterisking it. Depends on what happens against Tennessee. But I'm gonna go State in this one. Overall, it is a more interesting situation because I think State's got a chance to get that revenge game on South Carolina. That was a tight game to open up SEC play, 68-62 in Columbia. I like Mississippi State to play a really good game at home, finish out the regular season. Kim Palm's got this game 70-65 at 66% for Mississippi State. All right, Maddie, this is interesting, right? We've got these two bubble teams that are trying to get into the NCAA tournament. Head-to-heads are one of those things that aren't necessarily on the paper for consideration, but they play in a factor somewhere. So Texas A&M has to travel to Oxford and play Ole Miss in the Pavilion. And both these teams trying to get into the NCAA tournament. It is currently, as it stands, a Q2 game for both teams. That could change depending on what Ole Miss does against Georgia and depending on how well they play that game. But this is an interesting matchup for some teams that need to play their best basketball of the season in one game, really, as it comes down to the end. As I said, Ole Miss couldn't afford to lose one, and I don't think Texas A&M can afford to lose one. So who wins here?
I don't know. My concern for Texas A&M in this one, like you mentioned before, Ole Miss and their 3-point shooting. It can
It's
be
curious.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Texas A&M isn't a fantastic perimeter defense team. They're gonna have to force them inside. So if Ole Miss is putting up shots, knocking them down, I think Texas A&M might be going home sad. It really, like I said, just depends on how Ole Miss is shooting in this game. Because like we've talked about, Texas A&M rebounds together. Ole Miss,
Negative rebound differential.
exactly. So I mean, really, it depends. If you've got Texas A&M putting up all kinds of second chance opportunities, getting a lot of points, um, that Ole Miss isn't allowing from the 3-point line or anything along those lines. Texas A&M obviously has a huge opportunity here, especially if Ole Miss ends up going up in the standings and Texas A&M pulls off a bigger win than what we think it's going to be. I'm gonna go Texas A&M in this one. I talked myself into it.
Okay. All right. I can understand that consideration. To me, this is just a heck of a matchup. But the player I'm going to be watching the most, as I mentioned, you mentioned that 3-point shot. I don't think people appreciate just exactly what Ole Miss is kind of like as a 3-point team. They're only a couple of decimal points behind Florida and their 3-point shooting, which isn't electric necessarily. It's sitting right around. It's sitting right in the middle of the SEC, but it's if they're shooting as well as Florida at times, this really depends. That's the top half of the SEC. They're in the middle of the pack through that 7 through 9 range at 7.5 free throw or 3-pointers per game. So a player I'm looking for in this game is Matthew Morrell, who's the team leader in 3-point field goals made at 2.5. How hot does he get, and what does Texas A&M allow him to do in this game? Obviously, Wade Taylor, Boots Radford, those guys are the considerations for Texas A&M. And then Henry Coleman's going to be a big force on the boards, and same with Anderson Garcia. Really good players for Texas A&M. How those guys play this game on the rebound, it really matters. But one of the things that needs to kind of be talked about is the fact that this season at home, Ole Miss is 14-3. They've been a solid. They beat Florida at home. They've gotten wins. They were playing tough against Alabama and Oxford. Chris Beard's a really good basketball coach, and having home court at the Pavilion, I'm going Ole Miss. And I think this is going to be a heck of a basketball game with both teams having everything on the line in this one. So I'm going to take that home court advantage at the Pavilion, which is something last year I didn't think would be a phrase that would ever come out of my mouth. But I'm going to take it, and I'm going to rock with it, and I'm going to say Ole Miss beats Texas A&M, and they punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament with another Q2 victory, and what should solidify them at that point. We'll see how it all shakes out. But that one's a stressor for sure. All right. Last game we're talking about this week, and then we're going to do something a little bit different to wrap this week up. Kentucky is headed to TBA to face Tennessee on Saturday. Now, could Tennessee ask for a worst opponent? Like Bama gets Arkansas, man, to close out the season. If Bama's sitting there like, we beat Tennessee, we get Arkansas to close out the year. All we got to do is figure out that Florida game at that point. Now, Tennessee, like I said, 4Q1 wins, 4Q1 games to close out the year, and it just keeps on coming. Kentucky, a team they beat in Rupp earlier this season, had a really good basketball game against the Wildcats. That was a tough game last time these two got together and played. Really, Zakai Ziegler, if I remember correct, had a pretty good game in that one. I'm going to pull up the box score in that one, but it was a tough, hard-fought matchup. Maddie, what do you like about this matchup? And who do you think you need to be paying the most attention to in this one?
I mean, I think we are gonna have an absolute shootout in this one with Dalton Connect, um, Shepard, and then Antonio Reeves on Kentucky side of the ball. I think we're gonna see a lot of 3-point shots being made, and I think we are gonna see an absolute battle in the front court. Um, it's going to be a tough game. I think Tennessee's got it mainly because we've talked about it before. Kentucky, not much defense to be seen, and they're going to Tennessee. They're going to be TVA. Last game of the year, Tennessee's not letting up.
I definitely, yeah, and I was right, by the way. Zakai Ziegler had a huge game the last time these two got together. Ziegler put up 26 points and 13 assists in that game. He had a huge game in Rupp. And then Triple J, also 26 points in that game in 31 minutes. He had a huge game. But Kentucky's a good basketball team overall. Some other areas I'm really looking at, I really think needs to be considered in this game are the big guys. And I think Tennessee's got the better backcourt when you look at it. In their last game, points in the paint, Tennessee wins plus 12. On the rebounds, Tennessee wins the battle on the glass. They also had better bench production from their front court off their bench. And Tennessee didn't get much out of their front court or out of their bench production in that game, but the front court players that were swapped in and out on both sides, Tennessee won that one as well. So to me, plays a huge consideration in this game on how the front court plays out. To me, that's big. And with an SEC championship on the line and locking up another chance for a huge Q1 victory at home and the chance to lock up a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, I'm with you. Give me the Vols. We're too much alike this week. Too much alike. So I'm going to go the Vols in this one. I think this is going to be it. If they can manage beating South Carolina, this is the game that puts the bow on the SEC regular season title for the Volunteers. So to me, I'm going Tennessee in this to close out the year. And sweeping Kentucky on the season would just be an insane way to finish the year for the Volunteers. I couldn't. That's wild. That would be absolutely wild. Last year I had a friend I think Kentucky swept last year if I remember right. My buddy Chris, who's a Tennessee alumni, he has like a Vols group that all his alumni friends talk on, and they were talking about firing Rick Barnes last season after every Kentucky game. It's like I'm losing my mind, just losing it all. But yeah, be a heck of a year, and what's arguably it's a good rivalry. It's a good rivalry in basketball right now in the SEC. All right, so we're doing something a little bit different this week. And I gave Maddie a heads up on this. This is not SEC related, but before we come back to our next show, we will know a handful of teams that are going to be in the NCAA tournament. So the conference championships or the conference tournaments are going to be played out throughout the week. And on Sunday, when we, sit down to record again, we'll know a couple of those teams. And we'll have an idea. So the conferences that are going to be wrapping up their conference tournaments by the time we'll see you guys again, it's going to be the Ohio Valley Conference, the Big South, the Missouri Valley, and the A-Sun. All conferences that we take in consideration for our mid-major grouping for this. So Maddie, we're going to play a little bit of who you got. So Maddie, who you got to win the Ohio Valley Conference?
Hey, David, you ready for my Ohio Valley pick?
Yeah, I'm ready for your Ohio Valley pick. 501!
Let's go, Little Rock. I'm all in on the Trojans for this one. Sorry, I don't have a hat for any of the other ones. This was actually for I think a fundraiser after the tornadoes. I bought this hat, but it fits well in this. It fits well. I had it readily available, so why not? I mean, got my Bobby Porter shirt on. I am ready for Little Rock to take over Ohio Valley.
Absolutely. I'm with you. Team is on a 9-game winning streak. They're tied for first place in the Ohio Valley. Led by head coach, Arkansas legend Darrell Walker, and of course, NBA champion of the night on the 1993 Chicago Bulls. Got to give him the love. Got to love my hometown. I'm not from Little Rock, I'm from the area, but I gotta tell everybody that. But yeah, I'm from the Central Arkansas area. This is my hometown team. Give me the Trojans. Now, I do think there are obviously a couple of contenders in this league that we need to mention who could pull this thing out. And that is, of course, Morehead State, who played Bama earlier this season. Very good basketball team. And then UT Martin's not half bad either. Those three are the ones who are tied for first place in the Ohio Valley right now. But whoever ends up as the conference champion, it's going to be nuts. But right now, Little Rock with KK Robinson and Mikal Mitchell and a couple other good players on that team. They're the hottest team in that conference. And yeah, the Little Rock Trojans, I do believe, can win the Ohio Valley and pick up what I think is going to either be a 15 or a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. All right. So let's go to our next conference here. And we're looking at the Big South. Maddie, when you look at the Big South, who you got?
I mean, I this one's a hard one because we have several teams that we've seen play up against SEC teams that had a decent showing. We've had Gardner Webb, who we've seen several times play against Arkansas. Not that that's got any stock in this season. But I think I'm going to go UNC Asheville on this one. Have a decent home court record overall, 20-11, and they're 12-4 in conference. I feel like that gives them some decent standing. My only concern there is their record on the road isn't as good as a conference winning team, but it is trending upward. So I'm going to take UNC Asheville in this one.
Okay, so I am going to go with by the way, UNC Asheville for everyone. It's not a bad pick. That is the number 2 team right now in the Big South. So it's an interesting one for sure. But the team I'm going to be rocking with is a team that can shoot the 3 ball a little bit. Give me the High Point Panthers in this one. Give me Duke Miles at 17.8 points per game. Burnham for 2.3 3-point field goals made per game. The Panthers averaging 8.5 3-pointers in a game, 85 points a game. That is 9th overall in that, 9th overall in the country. It's a very, very good basketball team right now. High Point, they played Georgia earlier this season, and they hung around for a little while on Georgia. And so in that game, Georgia actually ended up beating High Point 66-58, which is one of the lowest scoring games that High Point had on the season. But they can shoot the ball. They can play well. They also win the glass by over 10 rebounds on average a night. So give me the High Point Panthers. I think they're a complete basketball team and poised to make the NCAA tournament. We'll see how their seeding plays out. All right, Maddie, this is probably one of the more entertaining ones that we've got. This has been a team or a conference that been talked about here or there for multi-bids. There's 2 really good teams in this conference and maybe even a sleeper in the Missouri Valley Conference. Maddie, for the Missouri Valley, who you got?
I mean, like you said, sneaky good conference here. We've got several that, are questionable to make the tournament. So, I mean, taking a look, we've had Drake, who's been an excellent basketball team, but I'm gonna go with I don't know if you've seen it, but the big man himself, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is what they're calling him. And Indiana State has been making a splash first time really since Larry Bird rep the Indiana State. So I think it's their year. I think they're coming back.
Indiana State's a good basketball team, and they have been flirting with the upper portion of the net all season. But let me tell you a little bit about Drake, and let me tell you about Tucker DeVries. 21.7 points per game. This kid gets to the free throw line also, hits about 5 a game. He's a very good basketball player, had a season high of 39 points. Really, really good player. He makes this Drake Bulldog team go. And they have a serious chance. These are the 2 teams that have to be the favorites in the Missouri Valley Conference. I like both these teams a lot. It's really hard to pick here. But if I'm going to pick a team, I'm going to pick the one that's been hot all season long, is chasing down, just more and more wins. They've got 26 wins on the season. I'm going Indiana State. Give me the fighting Larry Birds to win the Missouri Valley Conference. I think it's time that conference had a new champion. I think Drake's really good, but I'm like you. I like Indiana State here to win the Missouri Valley. Okay, finally, we've got the Atlantic Sun. I know who my pick is, but Maddie, who you got?
All right, on this one, I'm gonna go with Lipscomb.
Lipscomb. Okay, I like
I
it.
mean, solid team, a 20-11 record. It's one of those you look for those 20 wins for the people who are going to go to the tournament. If you can get 20 wins on the season, I think you can win your conference, especially when you're looking at the Atlantic Sun.
I get that's a fair argument. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I'm going to go a team that I've been looking at all season long. And I like the Eastern Kentucky Colonels to pull this out. They're a team that's been getting a little bit of hype since the preseason. They look like a pretty solid team. They got a lot of experience. Leland Walker, 15.6 points per game. Isaiah Cozart, game high of 33 points. This team also is an efficient 3-point shooting team at 8 3-pointers a game at 81 points a game for the Colonels. To me, they're a really good basketball team. They were one that I expected to make the tournament. They were one that I was going to pick for my mid-major spotlight at the beginning of the season, but I opted not because I didn't know if they would get higher than a 15 seed. So I'm expecting the Colonels to win the Atlantic Sun, and I think they get in somewhere as a 16 seed. To me, is what I'm feeling for them. So I like the Colonels here. Give me the Colonels. They've also played a pretty decent schedule, but Lipscomb's not a bad pick. I'm with you there. It's not a half bad one. Either one of those teams more than capable of winning this thing. Stetson's also kind of scary in that conference. I think they're one that could possibly do it as well. But yeah, I'm going to go with Eastern Kentucky. To me, that's the team. Played Alabama also earlier this season. Alabama fans might be a little bit familiar with the Colonels.
Yeah, I mean, Lipscomb played Arkansas and only lost by 3.
Yeah,
Granted, not saying much, but still.
yeah. I mean, you go to Little Rock, you play Arkansas, and yeah, you close out well against them and almost have a chance to pull out a victory. Yeah, that was sweating bullets for the Razorbacks in that game there late because it was a defensive implosion. But yeah, Lipscomb's a good basketball team, and they're one I certainly like out of that conference. So either one of those I think are good teams. But yeah, it'll be fun to see. I'm interested to see. I'm glad we're going to know who a couple of these tournament teams are going to be the next time that we sit down and talk and we put things together. We'll play a little bit more who you got next week. But overall, thank you guys so much for checking out the show this week. We appreciate you guys being here. If you have not already, please smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow us anywhere that you get your podcasts. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, some other platform that I'm not very familiar with, Amazon. We're probably there. We're everywhere. We've tried to get everywhere that we can find, like whatever the nanotechnology that's out there that carries everything to artificial intelligence, whatever. I don't. I'm saying words now, but please like and follow. We love having you guys here, and we are continuing to grow this channel, and we appreciate you guys being here. But yeah, until next time, we'll see you next week, and happy March.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.